Bukeli anguvusele ngikwamukele ehlelweni lweTasephalamende. Libito lami ngingilingithini Gule. Soloke ngisethi cathulweni takhe umlingani Samkelisiwe Khoza. Nalomhla ke singena endini yaba SACU lapho khona induna yetemafa umhlonishwa Neil Reckenberg wethula ke i-mid-term budget ya 2024-2025. Bukeli asivele ke singaphothise maseko asingene khona endini yaba SACU sive ukuthi ithini induna yetemafa.
Mr. Speaker, despite a challenging economic setting, the government has remained steadfast in ensuring that the fiscus is steered towards a sustainable position and public debt maintained at sustainable levels. The implementation of fiscal measures and reforms in recent years have proven to be difficult, but the government has made good progress in the containment of expenditures and the mobilization of additional revenues. Significant progress continues to be realized in addressing the bottlenecks that impede and discourage the participation and attraction of high-impact private sector investments into the country. Government opted to be intentional with prioritization of economic growth-related projects. Mr. Speaker, government is thoughtful of the global crisis posed by climate change in deliberations aimed at strengthening the response interventions of the climate threats of climate change within the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty. This will include making financial flows consistent with pathways towards climate-resilient developments. Mr. Speaker, the country has achieved a significant milestone in tax reform within the Eswatini revenue services, introducing of a new VAT system. This system is expected to bring increased efficiency and effectiveness in tax collection. Additionally, the introduction of presumptive tax will make it easier for small business owners to meet their tax obligations, offering them more manageable repayment terms while enabling them to continue operating and contributing to the economic recovery. Furthermore, the successful launch of the State Business Relations Program is fostering greater ownership and active participation between the government and the private sector, strengthening the role of business in driving economic growth. Mr. Speaker, global economic growth as reported by the International Monetary Fund, is projected to moderate at 3.2% in 2024 and 2025, following growth of 3.3% recorded in 2023. The global economy continues to battle with the persistent effects of intensifying geopolitical tensions, which triggered supply chain disruptions and elevated global inflationary pressures, thereby heightening economic vulnerabilities for most countries. Regionally, sub-Saharan Africa is projected to grow at 3.6% in 2024, owing to weak growth prospects of Nigeria and South African economies. The SADC region is projected to decelerate to 2.5% in 2024, following a growth of 2.7% in 2023. In 2025, growth for the region is projected to pick up to 3.3%. Closer to home, growth in the South African economy, which is our largest trading partner, is projected at 1.1% in 2024, rising to 1.7% in 2025. The rebound in the South African economy is underpinned by the waning effects of load shedding and improving logistics, which have affected the economic activity in the previous period. The global outlook remains on the balance. Public investment in advanced economies is likely to increase growth, spurred by the green transitions, infrastructural upgrades, as well as science and technology investments. Additionally, structural reforms could likely boost productivity for advanced economies. On the downside, potential threats emanating from emerging market debt distress, from tighter global financing conditions and economic slowdowns due to hikes in commodity prices from climate shocks or geopolitical tensions are anticipated to offset the positive gains. Mr. Speaker, the Eswatini's economy is projected to moderate by 3.6% in 2024, following a stellar growth of 5% in 2023, according to the rebased national accounts. The slowdown in the period will be mainly on account of the high base effect in the service sector in 2023 from the rebasing. This was an election year, as well as a slow start to the implementation of big projects, earmarked for the medium term. In the medium term, though, growth is envisaged to average at 5.4%, with a peak of 8.3% in 2025. The medium-term growth is underpinned on the commencement of construction in the energy-related projects, as well as prospective pickup in implementation of public and private sector projects, including the construction of the Mpangeni Dam under the Mkondo Ngwavuma Water Augmentation Project, the Tasephalamende Maloma and Sogo R14, and the Maloma Spambanweni R21 roads, construction of head offices, private malls and shopping complexes, amongst others. Other supporting subsectors such as professional services, transportation, quarried stone production, manufacturing, wholesale and retail, as well as financial services will also benefit from the construction activity and contribute to the overall outcome. The manufacturing subsector is expected to benefit from expansions in some industries such as sugar processing, textiles and chemicals. The mining and quarrying subsector is expected to maintain strong growth, buoyed by increased coal production and the exploration of other minerals. Mr. Speaker, the headline inflation averaged 4.2% in the first 9 months of 2024, moderating from 5.1% in the same period in 2023. This decline was mainly driven by a 10.2% deceleration in inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages, with notable decrease in bread and cereals, amongst others. Conversely, housing and utility prices reflect an uptick of 3.4 percentage points, driven by a 5.7 percentage point increase in actual rental costs. The Central Bank of Eswatini's September 2024 forecast predicts that headline inflation will average 4.2% in 2024. This is attributable to sustained reductions in food prices and moderating global Brent crude oil prices. Inflation is expected to stabilize in the medium term, with forecasts of 4.9% in 2025 and 4.8% in 2026. In view of the moderating inflationary pressures, the global monetary policy stance has been loosened following the tight stance adopted in the past 2 years. Hence, in September 2024, the Central Bank of Eswatini reduced the discount rate by 25 basis points from 7.5% in 2023 to 7.25% in the period under review. Following the same trend, the prime lending rate was also reduced to 10.75% to stimulate aggregate demand and also provide relief to businesses and consumers. Mr. Speaker, total credit extended to the private sector was recorded at 19.92 billion emalangeni as at September 2024, reflecting a 7.4% growth compared to the same period in 2023. This was mainly driven by an increase in credit extension to businesses and households, while credit extended to other sectors declined in the review period. Growth in credit extended to businesses was observed in subsectors such as manufacturing, construction, distribution and tourism, transport and communication, as well as other sectors, reflecting normal economic activity. Mr. Speaker, budget execution has been impacted by persistent fiscal and cash flow challenges and arrears, which were accumulating in the past years, stemming from expenditure pressures as the country was on a recovery path. The budget for 2024-2025 financial year has significantly increased when compared to the previous year, from 26.44 billion in 2023-2024 to 29.42 billion in 2024-2025. Total revenues and grants are budgeted at 27.5 billion, excluding about 1.5 billion for the SACU Stabilization Fund. The overall fiscal deficit for the current financial year is now projected at 953 million emalangeni, equivalent to 1.1% of GDP, a downwards revision from the budgeted deficit of 1.8 billion emalangeni, which was 2.1% of GDP. In 2024-2025 financial year, total expenditure at half year stood at 13.67 billion, compared to 11.86 billion emalangeni in 2023-2024. The increase is mainly due to inflationary pressures on goods and services, the implementation of a cost of living adjustment, and interest payments. This financial year, recurrent expenditure at half year stood at 10.73 billion emalangeni, while capital expenditure stood at 2.93 billion emalangeni. The recurrent budget execution rate stands at 46% in the current financial year, which is lower when compared to the 54% from last financial year. In addition, capital budget execution rate stands also at 46% at mid-year. Mr. Speaker, in the 2024-2025 financial year, government's total expenditure is expected to be lower than the budget allocations. This is a result of lower implementation of capital projects, which is caused by cash flow constraints. Domestically financed capital projects are expected to reduce the budget by about 670 million emalangeni. However, the government is still pursuing a budget support loan from the World Bank and the African Development Bank to ease the cash flow pressures. Mr. Speaker, at mid-year, total revenue and grants stood at 12.25 billion compared to 10.95 billion in 2023-2024. This shows a 1.3 billion increase, which is largely caused by the significant increase in SACU revenue and the administrative efficiencies from Eswatini revenue services, which is expected to improve tax collections. SACU receipts increased from 11.75 billion in 2023-2024 to 13.07 billion in 2024-2025, which is an 11.2% increase from the previous year. At half year, domestic revenue realized stood at 7 billion emalangeni, which is about 1.3 billion more than the previous year's collection of 5.7 billion at the same period. The government will continue looking at ways of enhancing resource mobilization while putting controls on expenditure to ensure the fiscus is on a sustainable path. With domestic borrowing falling short of financing needs, the government's working together with the central bank is considering other ways of raising financing and growing the financial markets. Mr. Speaker, when looking at the revenue side of the budget, domestic revenue at half year stood at 7 billion compared to 5.7 the previous year. Domestic revenue collected at half year reflects a 53% collection of the projected domestic revenues of around 15 billion emalangeni. Grants received at half year amounted to 156 million emalangeni compared to the year 2023-2024, which was 94 million emalangeni. At half year 2024-2025, total revenue and grants stood at 13.17 billion compared to 10.95 billion in 2023-2024. The increase is mainly due to improved SACU receipts. SACU receipts increased from 11.2 billion in the year 2023-2024 to 13.07 billion 2024-2025. In the half year, we received 6.53 billion emalangeni from SACU receipts compared to 5.1 billion in the year 2023-2024. This reflects the increase in SACU receipts expected this year when compared to last year. This source of revenue continues to prove volatile, and there's little control to manage it. Mr. Speaker, remain committed to building buffers. As of half year, we've set aside 750 million emalangeni in the reserves for the SACU Stabilization Fund, and we intend to save 1.5 billion by the end of the financial year. Mr. Speaker, income tax remains our largest contributor to domestic revenue collection, followed by value-added tax. Company tax, POIE, and other income tax collections remain relatively stable at 3.8 billion as at half year. Company tax collected during the first half of the financial year amounted to 902 million emalangeni. That is 45.8% of the annual company tax projected of 1.97 billion emalangeni. Individual taxes, that is, pay as you earn, collected at half year amounted to 2.3 billion emalangeni. This equates to 55% of the collection of the projected annual PAYE of 5.257 billion, and an increase of 494 million collected as the same time last financial year. This is despite a 4% COLA payment to civil servants. Mr. Speaker, tax on goods and services constitute our second largest contributor to the domestic tax revenue collection. VAT collection remains the largest source of revenue within these taxes. At half year, this totaled 2.43 billion which is 50% of the projected outturn of the 4.88 billion emalangeni annual VAT collection. The collection of VAT shows a slight increase compared to the 2023-2024 collection of the same period, which was 1.88 billion. In fact, it's probably quite a significant increase. A total of 147 million emalangeni has been collected from non-tax revenue as of half the year mark. This is lower than 224 million collected this time last year. Mr. Speaker, during the turning to the expenditure side, the budget was prepared with a focus on fiscal consolidation. However, achieving this goal has proven difficult due to the growing pressure to spend by line ministries, while cash flows remain a challenge. The government continues to monitor expenditure trends to ensure that commitments are contained within the available resources. Total expenditure for 2024-2025 financial year was budgeted at 29.4 billion, which is 33% of GDP, of which 23.1 billion is recurrent expenditure, which is 26% of GDP, and 6.3 billion is capital expenditure, which is 7% of GDP. It is projected that spending will be contained as implementation of domestically financed projects will be below target due to cash flow constraints. Mr. Speaker, it appears that expenditure trends are in line with mid-year expectations, as 13.7 billion has been committed against a budget of 29.4 billion emalangeni, which is about 46% execution. The wage bill, being the largest single component of total expenditure, stood at 4.8 billion emalangeni against a budget of 9.8 billion emalangeni, which is about 49% execution. Goods and services stood at 1.5 billion against a budget of 4 billion, which is a 38% execution, and transfers stood at 2.3 billion against a budget of 4.5, which is 51% execution. Finally, interest payments stood at 1.25 billion against a budget of 2.3 billion, which is 54% execution. Mr. Speaker, personnel costs remain high, particularly due to the government granting a 4% cost of living adjustment, combined with ongoing hiring in the education and health sectors. Mr. Speaker, of the full year allocation for interest repayments, 1.25 billion has already been paid at half year, with a projected outturn of 2.6 billion against a budget of 2.3 billion. The rising interest payments are a cause for concern, as projected outturn is expected to be 13% higher than the budget due to the domestic market increases and exchange rate movements in the external markets. Mr. Speaker, the execution rate of the capital budget at half year stands at 46%, equivalent to the expenditure of 2.93 billion. This shows an improvement as higher than the 1.45 billion, which is 27% executed the same period last year. The budget fiscal deficit is at 1.83 billion emalangeni, which is about 2.1% of GDP. However, projected outturns show that the deficit is expected to only be 953 million, which is 1.1% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to report that the listing of the government bonds in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has been successful. During the first half of the year, the government raised 400 million emalangeni, or rather 400 million South African rands, which has managed to decrease the backlog of arrears to suppliers, consequently bringing some relief to the private sector. The total public debt stock is estimated to reach 36.4 billion at the end of 2024-2025, equivalent to 40.8% of GDP, compared to 2023-2024, where it reached 34 billion emalangeni, which translates to 39.2% of GDP. The debt stock comprises 16.8 billion of external debt, and domestic debt accounts for 19.7 billion, indicating an increase of 7.2% from the previous year. Government has been decisively reducing the stock of arrears. Projected outturns show that arrears will be fully cleared in the year 2024-2025, and this will materialize when we receive $100 million US dollar budget support from the World Bank and the African Development Bank at $50 million US dollars each. Mr. Speaker, I plead for the support of the House when I present the loan bills for budget support. Mr. Speaker, net domestic financing is projected to be 450 million at the end of 2024-2025, of which gross domestic financing is 11.6 billion and domestic financing is 11.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, expenditure pressures are anticipated in the medium term as a result of the strong demand for service delivery. Consequently, revenue collection is anticipated to grow. However, total government expenditures will continue surpassing the revenue collections. In the medium term, the total revenue and grants recorded in 2025-2026 depict an overall growth of about 6%, amounting to 29.6 billion, and 30.3 billion in 2026-2027, and 35.1 billion in 2026-2027. Sorry, that probably does mean 2027-2028. The projected increase on revenue is underpinned by the anticipated better performance of domestic revenue collections, such as taxes on incomes, profits, and capital gains. Taxes on income, profits, and capital gains are envisaged to grow by an average of 12.4%, driven mainly by strong growth performance on personal income tax, which is projected to grow at an average of 11.8% over the medium term. This is due to improvements in administrative changes as well as efficiency gains, together with positive impacts on income tax amendments. Mr. Speaker, although domestic revenues are anticipated to increase, SACU receipts are anticipated to see a modest drop in 2025-2026 and an average of about 10.9 billion emalangeni throughout the medium term, which is a 4.7% decline. In the 2025-2026 financial year, total revenues, excluding grants, are expected to amount to 29.2 billion and to 34.6 billion in 2027-2028 financial year, representing an increase over the preceding years. Mr. Speaker, non-SACU revenues are projected to contribute an average of 40% of the total revenues excluding grants. The improvement in domestic revenues is linked to the economic growth, as it's projected to average 8.3% between 2025-2026 and 2027-2028 financial years, and a peak of 9.5% in 2025-2026. With GDP growth predicted to be 8.3% in 2025, revenues are expected to grow in line with GDP. Domestic revenues are expected to perform well to complement volatile SACU receipts. The government will continue to fund the SACU Stabilisation Fund should the windfall from SACU receipts be experienced in the future. The continued improvement by Eswatini Revenue Services, ERS, in tax administration and efficiencies is expected to yield positive results in the medium term. With successful implementation of planned measures, such as the consideration of an increase in alcohol and tobacco levy in 2026-2027, the introduction of VAT on digital services, and a planned increase in VAT from efficiency gains in 2027-2028 financial year, and improvements in efficient tax administration systems, domestic collection is expected to increase over the medium term, further leading to reduced dependence on the volatile SACU receipts. Importantly, the SACU Stabilisation Fund will cushion the volatility of the SACU receipts, which has been a long-term objective of the government to improve fiscal stability. The better revenue outlook is expected to support continued efforts towards narrowing the budget deficit, despite the anticipated increase in government expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal position is expected to weaken from the decline in SACU receipts, as the total government expenditure is expected to amount to 32.8 billion emalangeni in 2025-2026, with a growth of 14.4% when compared to the outturns of 2024-2025 financial year. Therefore, the budget deficit is projected to widen to about 3.3% of GDP in 2025-2026 and 4.9% of GDP in 2026-2027 financial year. However, our projections indicate that the deficit will ease gradually to 0.9% in the year 2027-2028. The wage bill is anticipated to grow significantly in the medium term due to the salary review and relaxation of the hiring freeze, exerting too much pressure on the already strained resources. In line with the growth in wages and salaries, purchase of goods and services are anticipated to grow at an average rate of 8% over the medium term, averaging 5 billion emalangeni over the medium term. This also represents the full operation of all government services as a result of the increase in project hiring or projected hiring by the government in the medium term. Interest payments are also expected to grow by 8% on average over the medium term, amounting to 2.7 billion emalangeni in 2025-2026 financial year. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure for 2025-2026 financial year is projected to reach 35.8% of GDP, of which recurrent is 27% of GDP and capital is 8.8% of GDP. The increase is mainly as a result of inflationary pressures on goods and services and the wage bill as implementation of the salary review is anticipated. In 2025-2026 financial year, total expenditure is expected to reach 32.8 billion, of which 26.2 billion is budgeted for recurrent expenditure and 6.6 billion is capital expenditure. Assumptions underlying these projections include inflation rate on goods and services, implementation of a salary review for the wage bill, employment growth of 2%, continued implementation of big projects like the Mkondo Ngwavuma, the Parliament Building, water projects, and the ICC and five-star hotel. Mr. Speaker, the Planning and Budgeting Committee, the PBC, remains alive to the need to raise more revenue in order to finance the programs of action and grow the economy. This is a mammoth task which will need collaboration within government and engaging development partners to fulfill the development mandate. Mr. Speaker, the health sector will still remain vulnerable as it still is facing challenges and the government's working around the clock to find long-term lasting solutions to ensure Eswatini gets service delivery to avoid the loss of life. The recovery of the basic health system at all levels through provision of the necessary medical supplies and medicines remains a priority. The government will continue to prioritize health-related expenditure and payments. Mr. Speaker, I cannot conclude without giving an update on the status of the Integrated Financial Management System, referred to as IFMS, as it's expected to positively contribute to the efficient management of public funds. Government officials from all relevant ministries are working with the Rwanda Corporation, a cooperative initiative, who's the consultant in developing and implementing the system. Development of the system is at an advanced stage as the planning and budget module is almost complete and training is ongoing as we prepare to kick off the budget process. The aim is to start in 2025-2026 financial year, budgeting in the IFMS. However, to ensure that we mitigate all risks, the current system will be used as a backup, as we all understand that new systems tend to have teething problems. The local economy is expected to benefit from positive spillover effects resulting in a projected growth of the South African economy, which is Eswatini's major trading partner. And it's on this backdrop that the commencement of major construction projects by the government, as well as the prospective pickup in the implementation of private sector projects, is expected to propel local economic activity in the medium term. Other supporting economic sectors, such as professional services and transportation, are anticipated to benefit from the implementation of these projects and further contribute to the overall economic growth. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, it's worth noticing that the country is an open economy when it regards to trade. As such, emerging global risks, such as geopolitical tensions that lead to global supply chain disruptions, render Eswatini's economy vulnerable to external shocks that may result in dampened macro-fiscal outcomes. Additional risks arising from climate change-related events pose a major concern, largely affecting output in the agriculture sector, agro-processing, and hydropower generation subsectors, and consequently pose a risk to projected fiscal outcomes. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bukeli kutawutsike evikini lelitako emalunga eParliamente atalitfola lithuba lekutsingitsa lawa maphakelo le-mid-term budgets lesethulwe ngiyoindvuna itemafa umhlonishwa Neil Rackenberg. Kanti-ke ithena iqhubeka nemsebenzi wayo indlu yabayisikhulu. Indvuna yetisebenti tembuso umhlonishwa Mabulala Maseko ufikele endlini atawuletsa-ke timphendvulo mayelana naloko lebekadzathunywe kona eParliamente, ikakhulukazi endzabeni yemaholo etisebenti tasemahekeni letingaphansi kwelitiko laka-Home Affairs letikhala-ke ngenibasha tathu. Asive-ke kutsi ibuya natiphi timphendvulo indvuna yetisebenti tembuso.
Honorable Speaker, nakayiphakamisa imotion umhlonishwa Madala Mhlanga. Ngayithatha nginema reservations ekutheni ibonakala ngazuthi kusase emotion lesanga qonzi ingqo etiko le public service. Ngakuveta kepha ke uyacela indlu ukuthi kangithathe. Sengithi kangilethe na incazelo naye. indzaba ye-overtime, Honorable Speaker, lefaka baka Home Affairs, le data back to 2015, indzaba lesakhulunyiswa i-public service, nelitiko laka Home Affairs. Akusho ukuthi yavela ngalo 2015. Kuvela ukuthi nje sale ikhulunyiswa kwaba ngu-2022. Kepha-ke lengasa nguvete Speaker, isesetafuleni. Lapho khona, kunelitiko laka Home Affairs, kunetinyonyana, tikhulumisana ne-public service, endzabeni overtime. Kusangavunyelwana Speaker, njengoba ngivetile la ku-report. Ekutheni, Honorable Speaker, uma ngabe utokhulumisa indzaba ye-overtime, kokuqala lengisanguvete indlu ayikwati, uye ubhalele i-public service, uthi ngicela kokuthi nathi tisebenzi nathi, titawusebenza overtime, titaseke tiyabhadalelwa, leo overtime nesesibalile kokuthi imali ingaka. Bese-ke sesiyayisebenta-ke siyi-public service, si-apply yonke-ke imithetho lekhona nema-general order lakhona, Honorable Speaker. Lokusho ushe uyacela. However, nangabe kuthi sebendi lapho khona le overtime ungeke uyibale lula. Sibese sesichambana nakulo kuthiwa-ke i-flat rate. Sivumelane ngokuthi njengoba niba usebenta i-overtime, lo ngeke ukhona kuyibala lula. Ngabekisa nje njengaye emaphoyisa, Honorable Speaker, amthola 15%. Kuba i-flat rate. Sesisho laba junior. Laba senior bona bathola 5%. Ngiyabekisa ngaloko, Honorable Speaker. Sithi-ke kuyacelelwa kuqala, but-ke kuleya ka Home Affairs kwaqhamuka sekuqhamuka kuthiwa i-public service sale iyobhadala i-overtime. Yathi-ke i-public service cha phela nicelele yini abakayicelele. Okay, hambani wende ama-calculations ena. Bawende ama-calculations nathi seyenda siyi-public service. Ngicela-ke sesingene kule report. Ithi-ke le report Speaker, kuze uqualify kuthola i-overtime, kufanele ube sewusebenza ama-hour langetulu kwa-176 ngenyanga, Honorable Speaker. But nangabe-ke ungena lapha ka Home Affairs, uyakhanza Speaker lokuthi labanye basebente 120. Kulo 120 hours bese uthi una 50 hours lo overtime. Kanzi sola kufike kulo 176 lokufanele asetshenzwe disebenzi ngenyanga, Honorable Speaker. Kepha-ke angifuni kungena kakhulu kuma merits ayo because indzaba lesesetafuleni Speaker, usakhulumisana litiko le-public service kanye nelaka Home Affairs, ufake ekhathi tinyonyana. Sisebuteke lama questions nokuthi-ke abajustify ngokuthi basho ngani ngokuthi kufanele bathole i-overtime. Ngiletoko leti nkulumo lesachubeka Speaker, even after le motion sefakiwe eParliament betichubeka nanyalo tinkulumo kusakhulunyisana, Honorable Speaker. Lokunye nje lesikudiscoverile sekukuveta nje ukuthi uyokhanza ukuthi nale overtime kumbe bebangakafundiseki kahle lokuthi ibalwa kanjani, because nangabe uku shift system uma day 1 wakho kuyi Friday akusho lokuthi-ke lo mgcibelo ngobe siyamathi phela une element yokuba holiday so udaba ne overtime. Nakulisonto akusho ukuthi udaba ne overtime, Speaker. Wena uyoze uyithola i-overtime yakho ku day number 6 and day number 7, Honorable Speaker. So ikanjalo so bokhanza athi lapha utathi kulo day 1 aqala one Friday, kulo day 2 awusengisebenza i-overtime because it's a Saturday. Akusiko kanjalo ku shift system, Honorable Speaker. Ngilokunye-ke lengithi nje angikuchaze kutovakala Speaker, but nje in a nutshell lena isekuma structures lafanele Speaker kusakhulunyiswana nalokuthi nje ngidayikhulumisa lapha kabandi seku preempt indzaba lesesetafuleni kanti phela litafula labekwa ngeParliament lokuthi akukhulunyiswana nangabe kumba sivumelana phela akube nemlamuli siye kuye nangabe asivumelane kumlamuli asambe phela kuyiwe ku-industrial court simangalele ukuthi i-public service ayifuni ukubhadala. Ngilapho-ke ngicabanga ukuthi-ke iParliament emva seku-exhauste onke lawo ma-structures ingase iyangenela Speaker. Kwanyalo isese between lamatiko lamabili. Kube bekuyi-question cha kumbe bengitayikhulumisa ngenabe Speaker kube bekuyi-question, but ngobe sekuyi-motion inokukhompela ngithi ke angikhoni ukuyikhulumisa kahle ngaloko ukuthi isesemkhathini wematiko lamabili newokuthi angivete eParliament ekutheni i-overtime yelitiko ayihlali e-public service lapha siyesi budget speaker kwateke ukuthi kunebaka home affairs kunebaka defense kunebaka banibani baba nebudget yabo kwethu si public service ukhipha instrument nathi sesitenedise kahle ukuthi bayilandzele yonke imithetho uma ngabe singakhipha nje willy nilly speaker si public service nga aswende umsebenzi thanks to statement lesikhishwa uMinister Finance siyakhomba lamhla sithi i-public service imali seyidlile njenyalo ku-half weminyaka ithi 49% lokho kusho ukuthi kube kusikwe eParliament ngaMinister wa-Public Service ushayelwa tandla ukuthi uyakhona ukubamba ibudget kahle uyakhona ukuthi imali speaker athi hambe uyashaya finance imali athi hambe tiye kuma capital programs singathi thathi kakhulu thina sina sithathe lokho nje siya ku recurrent expenditure honorable speaker sengisho ukuthi ke siye sithi apply kahle nangabe sikhanda ukuthi akwalandzeli lokufanele ukulandzela ngeke siyikhiphele instrument lula njengoba ngisho ukuthi lapha ke kwaba nebudlapha speaker kepha ke indzaba lesesetafuleni isasejele siyabonga speaker.
Sibonge mhlonishwa induna yaka public service bahlonishwa la bangafisa ku budema clarity nangabe akhona mhlonishwa DS.
Siyabonga mhlonishwa speaker. Mhlonishwa speaker, if you look at the report ngiyayathi handwriting emhlonishwa Minister Public Service lapha nje lo general order A250 vele nje wathatha songna i-copy and paste sethe lokho nje wakufaka kule report wabe uya conclude ngehandwriting yakhe lapha phansi kanti indlu beyicele ukuthi akasichazele ukuthi yini lele banga ukuthi kugcine kungefiki sesithe lesikhathi 2015 usho njalo umhlonishwa 2015 yalo it's almost 10 years kula mafora la khuluma ngawo ukuthi asasetshenziswa for 10 years speaker and iParliament has got every right si clear speaker ukuthi indzaba lesingakhulumisa kuphi lethe inkantolo kula mafora lamanye la khuluma ngawo umhlonishwa minister we are representatives of bantu including leTasephalamende. So it will be very wrong ukuthi matsakhunywa dinyonyane nematiko akusafanele sitingenele lapho angicabanga ukuthi ufair kule conclusion yakhe ukuthi iParliament aseyimecelene. It's very unfair tukwendlu yeParliament speaker ngila kubhalile kule handwriting lengisho and uyaqhubeka ukuthi October 9 batawuphinza bahlangane bese uyayi-update indlu ehloniphekile October 9 so engcile it's a month later bengisipela amasayiphendvula nyalo kutabe soyasho ukuthi kwendeka umhlangano lo nje namhla ka9 naku lo wagcine kuvinyelwana noma awusolo vele kuyaphikiswana kule budget la khuluma ngayo umhlonishwa minister ya budgetelwa yaphasiswa ngiyona lendlu le ndzaba overtime le kuleli tiko la Home Affairs ngosabe sesisho ukuthi ibambeke ngale public service lama internal controls ukuthi uyucele I should say ukuthi besingakwathi thina siParliament manje sathi lokuthi sayiphasisa ibudget ka Home Affairs yale nangizana le so angimati kumhlonishwa minister ukuthi lena siyayi adopta noma kulendlela la ngiva ngayo mne uthi hawu noma ya-adopta kungcono ngathi ezweli vele singayi-adopta speaker siyicithe kuchubeke le fora la khuluma ngayo and let's hope kulama foras lamanye kungagcine kufika kunale lesiphume emaphepheni dolo uve ukuthi lebesiluleka ngako landlini uyayivala language leseyilethe inkantolo ukuthi ithini kunaye bese solo siyikhulumisa lokho kugcine kuhlisa lesithundi sayo nalo hulumende ukuthi awu nini nithi kepha ijubo lenkantolo liphuma tenda nje neParliament beyilulekile so I hope and pray ukuthi kungendeki kunaye ka Home Affairs Umbuto lengicanga ngidawuba nawo masatha conclude minister kuchecka nje le general order like sayithilela kule report kuthi yangamuphi umnyaka vis-a-vis lama overtime lakhulunywa ngawo nga-2015 ukuthi bese ivele ikhona noma beyingekho. Angishiye le malunga lamanye mhlonishwa speaker.
Sibonge kakhulu mhlonishwa DS umhlonishwa Mvane Nkosi Msheng.
Mr. Speaker, umlu akavete Mr. Speaker. Kwekuthi akusiko kuhle Mr. Speaker lapha na ukhanza ukuthi uhulumende kanye netisebenzi Mr. Speaker kuba naletindzaba lebese tibanje bese tidonsa kadze Mr. Speaker. Lapha nje Mr. Speaker i-explanation ya minister noma induna isho lokuthi lenzaba ika Home Affairs but nawulalela lenzaba yalokubala phize futhi kuphumele instrument yokuthi cha sebangakhokhelwa laba lo khanza ukuthi bakulelo tiko nakukhulunywa ngenzaba i-overtime Mr. Speaker. Ngiyatibuta ke Mr. Speaker ngoba phela li-clear li-office laka public service in as much as kusenalo ukuthi kusaphikiswana. Kanzi phela ayifiki ngane ekugcineni Mr. Speaker. Nangabe kuyabonakala lokho ukuthi cha nasikhulumisana thine kungathi asivani. Lokho ukuthi isale phela ikhululwa ngoba ngisidisebenzi ukuthi cha ngoba singevani naka conclusion yakhe nje minister uyasho ukuthi no nangabe singavani phela kukhona ukuthi kumbe ingabe se i-adjudicatewa engcenye Mr. Speaker lenzaba lesikhuluma ngayo. Nyalo ke Mr. Speaker ngengiye kulo 2015 ngiloya kulo 2022 lathi minister iqale khona lokuvela. Nawubuka lo 2022 nyalo siku 2024 again solo sithi isakhulunyiswa Mr. Speaker phela ifike ekugcineni. Nangabe kubonakala ukuthi kukhona lafuna ukuthi no angikuva mina ukuthi ungibalela kanjani. Ato hamba aye engcenye atothola phela masinyane Mr. Speaker lokuthi ibe khona le ngcazelo lokhaza ukuthi seyichazwa mhlambe engcenye. Leni kuze lama issues atobese Mr. Speaker athatha futhi kuhlala phansi again. Nangabe sesi nganyulwe noma nangabe sebancanyulwe ngilokhanza ukuthi sebangenele emkhathini Mr. Speaker. Umuntu kumbe kungaba ngiloko Mr. Speaker ukuthi sikhutsate kuye minister lokuthi ayifike ekugcineni Mr. Speaker. Kungaba ngiloko ngiyabonga Speaker.
Sibonge Mvane Nkosi Msheng. Mhlonishwa wakwaSomdong.
Angibonge mcondzisi abanikwanga nivelela abantu abasebenza le market le mali yabo ngoba basebenza labantu. Lokubhlungu nje ukuthi abantu bavuka bawenda lo msebenzi and ukhona lo hleli longafuni ukubhadala labasebenza. And I think that is very unfair. Mcondzisi wenkulumo noma singayikhulumisa seyithini, this is just very unfair. Lokustifula le lokuzana le payment yalama employees. These people rendered their service and lalabak demand lalabak sebenta. And someone has got to say something about that. Ukuthi kwendekelani lokho evena banikwangani. Kwesibili kwesithathu mcondzisi nale mali athi yadliwa inflation. Now ukhuluma nje inflation, there's just nothing they're going to get out of that. Kodwa siphele lana siyadonsisana abantu abanikwa imali yonke leminyaka asikubuke phela silive mcondzisi ukuthi singasusa umsindo ngalongakafanele. Nangabe letindzaba lelitiko liyagaya liyasebenza lisebenza ngalenza. Why it has taken so long? Kuaddressa an issue lefana nale mcondzisi wenkulumo. This is just injustice at its best. Lana nje kungabi nendzaba kungangenelani kunganaki ukuthi labanye abantu bamele banakekele nabe bawendile umsebenzi basebenzile. Kumbe umuntu angacela mcondzisi lokuthi lokusenza bayize ifike la parliament ikhulunyiswe ngulamalunga is because la sinenje singulamalunga lalabasebenza lebasuka lemangweni yethu and bakhala la kithi lokusolo ababhadalo and nawubuka lesikhathi solomane kungabhadalwa labantu akusimisi kahle akusibeki kahle singesishami sethu tayilive nasebabikile nanakithi ukuthi ababhadaleki letimali tabo labatisebenta siyacela mcondzisi ukuthi lenzaba lena vela ikhulunywe la hayi le la kathi minister yokhulunywa khona sesicale nje siyayiteka la akaphume minister hambe alungise le nginga yale ka Home Affairs sibonge labahlonishwa labayisukumisa landlini bomadala mhlonishwa amadala benda umsebenzi omhla kakhulu bayisukumisa so sitoyikhulumisa sonke mcondzisi lo kwenteka le kuyasaffecta nathi lalabasebenza lehlobo tethu lalaba abanjelo le mali siphila nabo nangabe babanjelwe kanje nakithi kubhlungu mcondzisi siyacela nje ukuthi induna ayithathe ngenhlitiyo lendlela lenzaba iyiphuthumise mani saliphela sesitse kakhulu lesikhathi ngiyabonga mcondzisi
Sibonge mhlonishwa kaSomtong, mhlonishwa kaSamayiwan.
Siyabonga mhlonishwa speaker. Mina speaker ngikhathathwa ngilo ukuthi ngabe ngibani longaqhamuka nje namhla athi mina uhulumende ungibhadele because lengaphandle lasihleti khona wonke mvu yakhala ngekuthi uhulumende uyamkweleta emavini letawo sitabe silethe abo head teacher bakweleta kusukela kubo 2016 2015 up to today solo kuyakhulunywa umbuto wami ngespeaker uthi ngabe la letinkulumo ti in good faith yini because lese ngunakile ngalama negotiations la kawenda ko uhulumende naletisebenzi usuke informality nasithathele tindzabeni letsemva usuke informality ukuthi sibakhulumisile otherwise labantu le engaphandle bayakhala speaker uthi minister beta baka Home Affairs batocela ukuthi laba ababhadalwe yafika iMinister of Public Service yathi yagodlela ukuthi khona labangakwendi laba kahle ngubani lekufanele ende kahle ngileti sebendi yini noma ngilama officials ale Home Affairs lokungendi kahle kwabo laba sekuaffecta manje ke le operation yale live ngisukumela nje speaker kucela ukuthi labamvu laba basibuko sale live bafana ma receptionist ale live wonke longena laveni uwenza kibo nyalo na uphethele kwe passport lensendele kona speaker ukuthi sinakeke kahle emagedeni abasasinaka kakhulu sebanaka na indzaba naye ukuthi hey yena konke ligedele uphuma kilo speaker ngathi na uphuma airport kona ukuthi kunjani but na uphuma lamagedeni kunaleyo nkinga leyo speaker siyacela kumhlonishwa ukuthi ngeterm yakhe ngize ngiyatibuta silo hulumende wa 2013 to 2018 bekunjani lapha because everybody is complaining 2013 ma order ngcono wona bhadala 2014 maphoyisa ma junior officers ayashika babhaqe ngelicembe kepha siyababona 2015 ba Home Affairs 2016 bo head teacher 27 bekwende njani lapha lithuba lemhlonishwa na fire uyakhala naye lithuba lemhlonishwa mabulala maseko umhlonishwa losebenza ngemandla ukuthi letindzaba leti nakaphuma 2028 abatsothile akunikwe lamaswati le mali yawo sonke wonke lo swati nje lokweletwako hulumende wemhlonishwa maseko mane asothele ngiyacela speaker laba maswati sekavele angene etinkingeni abalile wona bayadonsisana bona ukuthi awukwendanga nawo yenda nawo siyacela mhlonishwa mane baniko nami ngisekela umhlonishwa DS ukuthi asekaphinze uyibuka umhlonishwa ukuthi hamba kanjani
Sibonge mhlonishwa waseMayiwan, mhlonishwa wasemafutheni.
Asibonge mcondzisi inkulumo. Nami nje sekucela kuye umhlonishwa la minister ukuthi awu lelitiko lakhe phela kungabi phe kuba litiko lekudzadzalata yonke into kuyadzadzalatwa nje lapha kakhe. Lungisa mhlonishwa. Wonke umuntu ukhala ngalelitiko, lelitiko akase libe productive kanye. Ngiyacela mhlonishwa ngoba labantu kude imali abantu bathethe tikweleti labanye batibulala bathi ukuthi kuti imali yabo afike athi itiko la minister wamleka Mthandzawo lithi how far akulungu lokho minister sama tindlela zokungasebenzisana kanjani khuluma nalamatiko ngoba labantu bathunywa ngelamatiko labasebenta kiyo ukuthi abende lo msebenzi lo batawubhadaleka so yafika ke so yabona ukuthi oh litiko lende liphutha laba balela kabantu lungisa masinyana nelitiko ubuye bafundziswe abantu babhadaleke matata 2015 na 2022 namhla 2024 siya 2025 iyophela nini lenzaba akase wena la time frame minister na ukukhulumisa lenzaba letifaka wena lethi manje tijubeke matata ngoba lokupheka udonsa nabo madibhane bayakhala yabo yaleka tseni ngiyacela nje minister nyalo esiyazi netinkantolo letiyasifundisa ukuthi hey ngakusebenzeke kanje speaker through you speak sesitafundiswa nathi inkantolo ngathi asisawathi umsebenzi wethu ngiyacela speaker ukuthi induna ehloniphekile ake seyitshengise ukuthi nyala ibambile kuyaqina ukubona litiko ukuthi lisebenze lokungeko singabe solo sinanga ngoba letikhala tawuphela kungena saphela kubuya sibuye kuwo siphela kubuye lelitiko speaker sonke isikhathi litiko ake lisebenze indvo litaba productive sesibonga nje kujabule sive ukuthi awuqa sebenzile letiko la minister kulesikhathi salonyaka ngiyabonga
Sibonge Mhlonishwa wasemafutheni Mhlonishwa wasemasayisini
ngiyabonga kakhulu Mr Speaker lithuba eMaswati ayakhala siyayicela indvuna siyayinxusa nelitiko layo ukuthi ayiwanake laMaswati lakhalayo Mr Speaker ayisebentela le mali Mr Speaker maye kubhlungu kusebenta ungakajabuli Mr Speaker le mali lena siyikhulumise kakhulu kuParliament lendlulile yes11 kude idebate kodwa li report yaka Home Affairs beyingafaki lenkulumo le ekugcineni yagcina iphasile le mali Mr Speaker siyacela ukuthi litiko likukhanze kufanele ukuthi laMaswati ayithole le mali Mr Speaker la ithi indvuna kwakufanele ku requestwe litiko belifanele li requeste kuze lito grantwa le mvumo yekuthi kube ne overtime akusiwo ke laMaswati Mr Speaker lebe kufanele acele ngilama officials ngilaba phathi balelo tiko kulawo ma office Mr Speaker laMaswati siyawacelela ukuthi awanikedwe le mali ngoba ayisebentela siyawacelela kakhulu Mr Speaker kuniketwa kwawo laMaswati le mali le kuyawubuyisa sitfundi kuleli tiko kuyawubuyisa sitfundi eParliament kuyawubuyisa nesitfundi kuhulumende licobo siyacela ukuthi umhlonishwa nelitiko lonke bakhanze kufanele ukuthi bawabhadale laMaswati overtime yawo ngiyabonga Mr Speaker
Sibonge Mhlonishwa wasemasayisini Mhlonishwa Gek
Angibonge umcondzisi wetinkhulumo lesimo lesilapha emagedeni Mr Speaker akusengceki labantu laba lapha Mr Speaker basebendile akusho ukuthi bacela abangakaka kwenti banjalo nje Mr Speaker bethenjisiwe kuyayihluphe ke Mr Speaker ukuthi wethembise ungasafezi mina ngiyakholelwa Mr Speaker kwekuthi uma ngabe phela sekunebulukhuni kude Mr Speaker la kungahlalwa khona phasi nebantu mhlambe Mr Speaker ungakhulumi lokunengi uvetele simo Mr Speaker lesilambi kwakho ukuthi nginana inkinga nayi kuze inkinga yonke iqatululeke labantu laba Mr Speaker bathole ema-order kuthi abavukele emsebentini batawubhadalwa uma ngabe ke Mr Speaker kukhona lokukhonakala kusikonakala akonanga leti-7 letasebenta kona labanye mhlambe bebasembi kwabo abasufake Mr Speaker abafile abantu labasembi kwabo siyabacelela Mr Speaker laba indvuna lehloniphekile asimane siyibambise laba babhadaleke kubhlungu Mr Speaker kwekuthi indzaba idose lichi igcine Mr Speaker seyinemthelela lomubi angibekise nje Mr Speaker uma kungathiwa labantu bagcine bayema lamagedeni asakhona ukuphuma live Mr Speaker seliyangihlinyeka imnotho wale live uhamba ngemagede kunemaloli lehlenyuka lamagedeni ngibo laba basemagedeni once kwafika lesikhathi sekuthi labantu bafika lapho Mr Speaker liyabambeleleka live kanti lamuhla Mr Speaker langa lekuthi simane sibambise indvuna ehloniphekile simane sibone ukuthi babhadale kanjani nayo indvuna ngoba ihlakaniphile ngiyayathi futhi ngiyayitsanza inetindlela Mr Speaker lengadenda kwekuthi iwuvula kuphi umnyango kuthi laba babhadaleke bese kuyolungiswa ke Mr Speaker kulungise laba labona ngoba indvuna ichaza kahle ukuthi kunalabona la but akonanga laba Mr Speaker mhlambe kona baphathi babo mhlambe kona labanye labaseceleni akusufa ke laba Mr Speaker bafele labanye labona siyabacelela Mr Speaker indvuna ehloniphekile ayimane sibambise I thank you.
Ngemuva kwekuthi emalunga ayidzingidze lepoti lethulwe induna ye-Tasephalamende tembuso ibese indlu ivumelana ngavilini ukuthi akutholakale nje lifastelo lelidudane bavele ke bayiqithe ngayo leyo report leyo losho ukuthi ayikemukeleki ireport lelethwe induna ye-Tasephalamende tembuso mabulala maseko endlini mayelana nemaholo e-Tasephalamende telitiko laka Home Affairs letho lisebenzela emahekene live. Bukele asilibambe lapha ke hlelo lalomuhla leTasephalamende saphinde sibeke nasevikini lelitako sikulethele wona umsebenzi loyentiwa iPhalamende eliva la Kangwane kanti ke sibonana evikini lelitako mbukeli usale kahle kwalomuhla.
Hey you! Yes, you. Have you paid your TV license?
Did you know that by paying for your TV license fees, you will be complying with the laws that govern television possession, in particular the Swaziland Television Authority Act of 1983 and its regulations? It is a legal obligation.
Paying for your TV license can